My name is Claire Mitchell. I used to think graduation day would be a sweet milestone, the kind of dazzling beginning movies often portray. Smiles, tears, tight hugs, vibrant flowers, and proud eyes from family. But, standing in the middle of Stanford Stadium that morning, when my name was announced alongside the words, Honorary Valedictorian in Computer Science, I saw only three familiar faces in the second row. No flowers, no expressions, no applause, just quietly scrolling on their phones as if nothing happening was worth their attention. I still walked up to the stage like every other student. I shook the dean's hand, received the diploma I had spent 4 years chasing through scholarships and research, then stepped down to the echo of applause from friends and other parents. But where I searched for one look, just one look of pride, there was only a hollow void. After the ceremony, while other students posed for pictures with their parents, I heard my mother's voice. "Claire, come take one with your sister." I walked over. Sophie, my younger sister, stood between our parents, grinning brightly as if she were the one who had just graduated. I stood beside them, forcing a smile for the sake of the ritual. The camera kept clicking, and my father sighed, "Don't smile so much. It looks odd." That was the first thing he said to me all day. Right after the last photo, my dad glanced at his watch and pulled me aside toward a small corridor that led to the engineering wing where students waited before presenting their theses. My mother followed, carrying an old leather bag, not for gifts, but for a folder. Sophie closed the door behind us. I stood in the middle of the three of them like so many times before, already knowing that whatever was about to happen had nothing to do with celebrating me. My mother pulled out a stack of papers and said in a falsely gentle tone, "These are the patent documents. We just need you to sign here, it'll be quick." I looked down and realized it was a full intellectual property transfer form, including the natural language processing algorithm I had developed over the past 2 years. The lines of code I wrote during a stormy night when my hands were shaking from the cold because I couldn't afford to fix the heater, the endless nights in the lab until 2 a.m. just to track down an unnamed bug. My father cut in, skipping the pleasantries. "Sophie's getting ready to launch a tech company. She has a clear direction. And you have your degree now, you can go work, have stability. Letting Sophie manage the patent is the best move. She needs a start." I stayed silent. It wasn't rage, I felt it was a hollow kind of heartbreak. I looked at the three of them, my parents, who were supposed to be my foundation, and Sophie, the little sister who had always been lifted by everything I never had. They didn't ask for my opinion. They didn't see me as a creator. They saw me as an asset to be transferred, a tool the family had the right to control. I shook my head. No explanation, no need to argue. "I can't sign this." The air in the room turned cold. My mother looked up, her eyes now blazing. "Claire, don't be selfish. Your sister needs this. She has talent, she's gaining attention on social media. She can commercialize your idea while you're always buried in code and academics. What do you know about business?" My father said nothing more. He simply stepped forward, snatched the diploma from my hands, the one I had received not 10 minutes ago, and tore it in half right in front of me. The paper floated to the floor, like the sound of my childhood being ripped apart. Sophie just shrugged, as if it all made sense. I didn't scream, I didn't break down in tears. I just looked at them for a long, long moment and said quietly, "What you tore wasn't my diploma. It was the last bit of respect I had left for you." Then I turned around and walked away, leaving behind a family that never truly saw me as their own, only as a machine for producing achievements. The door closed behind me, softly, like the final period at the end of a sentence. I walked out of that small meeting room like someone stepping out of an old dream, a dream I had stopped believing in long ago, the dream that one day, my family would finally see me, really see me. But I should have known that day would never come, because ever since I was a child, I had always been invisible in the very house I called home. Sophie, my younger sister, was always the center of every spotlight, every glance, every hope. She had naturally golden hair, a toothpaste commercial smile, and eyes that knew how to soften even the hardest heart. My mother once said that when Sophie walked into a room, she made it light up. And me? I was the kid who stayed holed up in her room, buried in math books and old computer parts people had thrown away. I once took apart a broken printer in the garage just to see how it worked inside and got scolded for making a mess. I fell in love with programming when I was 12, the age when most kids were still playing with dolls or building Lego castles. I was in a corner, trying to write my first line of Python code on an old laptop my dad was about to toss out. The first time I built a simple game where a square moved back and forth when you pressed play, I excitedly showed it off. My dad glanced at it and asked, "Are you playing games? Leave it there, I'll reset the machine tomorrow." My mom added with a smirk, "What kind of girl spends all day glued to a computer? So unfeminine." That phrase, "so unfeminine," echoed through my teenage years. But what they never understood was that I never wanted to be like anyone else. I just wanted to be myself, but even that simple wish was treated as unacceptable rebellion in my family. Sophie, of course, was different. She wrote poetry, sang songs, knew how to wink at dad to get what she wanted. She once painted a watercolor for mom with the words, "I love you more than anything," and my mother framed it, hung it in the center of the living room. I once built an app to remind her to take her medication, and she said, "There are already tons of those on the App Store. Why waste your time?" I never blamed Sophie. She didn't do anything wrong except be born with a gift I didn't have, the ability to make our parents proud. But as I grew older, I realized that the distance between us wasn't because I wasn't good enough, it was because they never tried to understand who I was. When I applied to college, I got accepted into Stanford for computer science. My hands shook as I opened the acceptance letter. I cried alone in my room, feeling like the world had finally said I was worthy. I brought the letter to the dinner table and placed it in front of my parents. My dad read up to the words computer science and scoffed. "That's a guy's major. What are you gonna do with that? Sit in a room writing gibberish code no one understands?" My mom just shook her head. "That major has a high dropout rate. You'll change your mind soon enough." They didn't congratulate me. They didn't ask what I wanted. They didn't ask what I needed. They just said that if I insisted on choosing that path, I'd have to fund it myself. Meanwhile, Sophie, who hadn't even graduated high school yet, had already been given a deposit for an art academy in Paris and a brand new Mini Cooper to help her get to weekend art classes more easily. I arrived at Stanford with 2 old suitcases, a partial scholarship, and a determination I folded carefully into every crease of my clothes. I worked part-time in the lab, took overnight shifts at the library, and tutored freshmen just to cover tuition and rent. While my classmates went to weekend parties, I stayed in the computer lab, testing out new algorithms. I had no one backing me, no care packages, no check-in calls. Every holiday break, my friends went home and I stayed behind in the dorm, writing code. But in that silence, I found strength. I started researching natural language processing, how machines could understand human context without translating word for word. I discovered a new model that nearly doubled the learning speed of existing AI language algorithms. That was the beginning of the patent my parents would later try to steal from me, but at the time, I didn't know that. All I knew was, for the first time in my life, I felt truly good at something. Something no one could take away from me. One time, I went home for the holidays. During dinner, Sophie shared that she was working as a media advisor for a tech startup her boyfriend had founded. Both my parents looked at her like she had just been accepted into NASA. I joined the conversation, mentioning that I was applying for a patent and that my algorithm had been highly praised by a professor from Microsoft. They might even buy it after graduation. My father just raised an eyebrow and asked, "You did it all by yourself? Why not have Sophie help with the media strategy? She's great at that stuff." I smiled, but inside, it felt like someone punched me in the chest. I had grown used to being invisible, but I never expected to have my light stolen in that way. They didn't care what I had done, only whether my sister could use it. After that, I never went home again. I knew it made me look like the ungrateful daughter, but if I had to choose between loyalty and self-respect, I'd choose the latter. Because once you learn how to live without your family's love, you also learn how to build light from within. I never set out to enter the tech world as a disruptor. I just wanted to understand the world in my own way. Through 4 years of college, in the quiet company of thousands of lines of code and countless nights in front of a dimly lit screen, I realized what I was chasing wasn't just tools, it was connection. Between humans and machines, between language and empathy, between myself and who I truly was. I didn't have a private lab or a research team or even a budget, but I had silence. And in that silence, something took root quietly, firmly. It began with a small idea, born from the frustration of seeing how robotic current language learning apps were. I had studied French during my freshman year and noticed that no matter how advanced the software was, it couldn't grasp metaphors, subtext, or emotional nuances in human speech. A machine could translate "I'm fine" into "je vais bien," but it would never understand when someone was actually holding back tears. And I thought, what if a machine could learn language like a child through context, emotion, and interaction? I started building a machine learning model that could construct its own semantic network, meaning it could understand the relationships between words based on emotion, tone, and situation. I trained it using thousands of real-life conversations, complete with subtitles, emotional cues, and contextual reactions. Instead of translating word by word, my model analyzed the purpose of the communication the way someone learns a second language by living among native speakers. I called it Voxa, a simple name, but to me, it was the first voice I had ever truly created. At first, it was just curiosity. But the deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't just a project, it was something that could change the way humans and technology interact. I spent the entire summer of my junior year working on the model. No trips home, no internships, no vacations like my friends. I requested after-hours access to the lab, applied for extra GPU accounts from the university to speed up model training. Sometimes, I fell asleep on the keyboard, hand still resting on the mouse as if closing my eyes for a second would let me wake up and continue the idea that had just sparked. By senior year, I registered for a graduate research conference on artificial intelligence, co-sponsored by several major companies including Microsoft. I submitted my presentation, expecting nothing more than a bit of feedback. But when I stepped onto the stage, 20 minutes into the talk, the room went strangely quiet. No more keyboard tapping. No whispering. Just eyes fixed on me, a skinny college student with a high ponytail and plain clothes talking about a language learning model that didn't rely on translation. I showed a demo of a conversation between Voxa and a Korean student. The machine didn't just understand the words, it responded with emotional nuance. When the student said something sad, Voxa didn't reply with perfect grammar. It replied like a friend. "That sounds really hard. Do you want to talk about it?" After the presentation, a sharply dressed woman approached me. She handed me a card and introduced herself as Emily King, AI Product Director at Microsoft. She said, "I watched your talk. I'm impressed not just by the algorithm, but by how you understand that language is emotion. Have you thought about filing for a patent?" I smiled nervously. "I've been thinking about it, but I'm not sure how." She simply nodded. "If you need help, reach out. Whether or not you ever work with Microsoft, what you've built deserves protection." That night, I went back and opened my laptop. I looked up every step in the patent filing process. I didn't tell anyone, not my advisor, not my friends, and certainly not my family. I filed the application on my own, under the name Claire Marie Mitchell, with all the technical documentation and experimental results. I drafted the papers myself, drew the model diagrams myself, revised them over 20 times until every detail was exact. Then I sent it in quietly, but with steady hands. About 2 weeks later, I got an email. "Your application has been received and is under review. Application code, USVXA 0425. I printed it out and pinned it to my wall. No one knew. But I knew. I had done something no one believed I could do. A few days after that, I received another email, this time from Emily King herself. The subject line, "Proposal meeting after graduation." The message was short and simple. We'd like to schedule a private meeting with you about the Voxa project. Ideally, sometime after your graduation. Please let us know your availability. I read that email over and over again. There were no compliments, no promises. But to me, it was the first door opening not because they wanted me, but because what I created had value. I closed my laptop and sat by the window, staring out at the Palo Alto night sky. The city was still buzzing, my roommates were partying before graduation, and I just wanted to hold on to this moment. Because for the first time, the future didn't look so uncertain. It was coming one step at a time and I would meet it, without anyone holding my hand. I wasn't surprised to see my family at graduation. The only surprise was, they showed up early. Way too early. Completely unlike every other occasion before birthdays, conferences, research awards where they always had some excuse for being late or didn't show up at all. But this time, my dad was the first to send in an RSVP. My mom wrote a long email asking what kind of outfit would be appropriate. Sophie texted me privately, just one sentence. Make sure you dress properly, we're taking family photos. Strange, but I didn't question it, not because I believed, but because, in a weak moment, I wanted to believe they came for me. Because for the first time, I had achieved something no one in my family ever had, graduating as an honors valedictorian in one of the most competitive tech majors with a project that had caught Microsoft's attention. I thought, maybe this time would be different. Maybe I'd come far enough for them to finally see me. Graduation took place under the bright sun of Stanford Stadium. Thousands of students in black robes lined up, waiting for their names to be called. As I stepped onto the stage, holding my valedictory speech, I glanced down and caught my mother's eyes. She was on her phone. Sophie smiled faintly as the camera panned. My dad wore sunglasses. I couldn't tell if his look was indifferent or hiding something. I still gave my speech, just as I had rehearsed 100 times. I didn't come from a place where I was always understood. But I learned something. When you're pushed into darkness, you learn how to shine. A simple sentence. No direct accusation. But when I looked down again, my mother was staring straight at me. No applause. No smile. After the ceremony, students swarmed each other like bees, friends, families, professors crying, hugging, cheering, snapping photos, handing out flowers, moments of pure and honest joy. I stood still in the crowd, watching families cradle their children like treasures, like warriors returned from a long battle. I longed for a hug. A proud look. Just one small phrase. Claire, you did it. But instead, my mother walked over, still clutching that worn leather bag, smiling with that usual artificial calm. Come here, dear. Let's take a picture with your dad and Sophie. I stood between them. Sophie put her arm around my shoulder. My father told the photographer, shoot landscape, make sure to get the Stanford logo in the back. No one asked how I felt. And then, after that photo, everything changed. My dad said quietly, is there somewhere more private? We need to talk. Before I could nod, my mother gently pulled my sleeve toward a side corridor behind the hall where a faculty break room was located. The room was cold, plain, with a round table, a few plastic chairs, and pale fluorescent lights. The door closed. The noise outside vanished instantly. It felt like I had stepped into a courtroom. My mother sat down and pulled a folder from her bag. Sophie took out an expensive fountain pen from her purse and placed it on the table. My dad remained standing, arms crossed like a lawyer preparing to present his case. Claire, he said in a voice straining for calm. This is the patent transfer agreement. For Sophie. I didn't process it right away. What? I asked. Your Voxa patent. You haven't negotiated anything yet, right? No deals? No signatures? I nodded. My father continued, good. Because the family has mapped out a better plan. Sophie's drawing attention from investors. She needs a real product to prove herself. Your invention would be the perfect launch. I froze. Sophie tilted her head, smiling softly. You're not really the type to commercialize ideas. I can turn it into something real. I've got connections. A marketing team. Potential investors. You. You're great with the technical stuff. I swallowed hard. The air in the room thickened. And if I don't have anything to launch with, Sophie added, people will keep saying I was handed everything, that I have no talent. But you already have everything. A degree, recognition, even praise from Microsoft. Sharing a little, what's the harm in that? I didn't answer. I looked at my father. He pushed the stack of papers toward me. Sign it, he said. We'll keep your name under the technical section. But the rights for commercialization and distribution will go to Sophie. She's the face of the brand. I still didn't move. My mother began to lose patience. She sighed. Claire, don't make this difficult. Your sister needs a career. You always act like a machine, closing yourself off. You don't have leadership skills. You don't have presence. This isn't for you. I shook my head. Not because I was considering, but because I found it almost laughable. A kind of sorrow that hurt too deeply to cry. No, I said, I'm not signing. The room fell into a dead silence. Sophie let out a small laugh, her gaze shifting from gentle to condescending. My father, no longer able to keep his composure, suddenly snatched the diploma from my hands and ripped it in two. Paper fluttered to the floor, a piece landing by my feet. I stood frozen. He barked, if you can't understand what real value is, then this degree means nothing. My mother leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, and muttered as if she were delivering some life philosophy. A piece of paper does nothing. Your sister needs a career, not your pride. No one apologized. No one thought they were wrong. They were convinced they were right. I picked up the torn diploma, folded it gently, as if it were my own skin that had just been ripped. I didn't cry. I looked at each of them in that room, the people who gave birth to me, the one they loved more than me, and the person who once called me daughter, then said quietly, my voice calm to the point of frightening. There's nothing here for me to sign, but thank you. Because today, I finally understood. This family didn't lose me, they never had me. I walked out of the room carrying a torn piece of paper and a heart that no longer expected anything. I thought I would collapse, but I didn't. I felt light. Like I had just laid down a stone that had crushed my chest for 22 years. I don't remember how I left campus. I only remember my feet moving on their own, through crowds cheering and celebrating, as if the graduation ceremony had never happened. The vibrant bouquets, the glowing smiles, the joyful shouts, it all felt distant, like a movie where I was just a background character, standing silently behind the curtain. In my backpack, the diploma torn in two was folded carefully between two old textbooks, like a wound I wasn't ready to touch. I walked back to my apartment, called no one, played no music. Just opened the door, took off my shoes, turned on the light, and sat on the floor. The tiny room I had rented for the past 3 years sat 15 minutes from campus, the place where I had stayed up through countless nights, writing lines of code, testing models, eating ramen because I couldn't touch the money I had saved for tuition. In the corner, still hung the sticky note, "Meet Emily, Microsoft, after graduation?" Written weeks ago, taped up with cheap tape, a note I'd almost removed more than once, thinking it was just polite talk. But now, as I stared at it again, I noticed my hand trembling slightly. I opened my laptop. The screen lit up with 3 new emails. One from the Stanford Library reminding me to return books. One from Amazon about a delayed delivery. And the third, its subject line hit me like a beam of light in the dark. Voxa AI Technology. Acquisition and Leadership Proposal. Sender: Emily Kang, Microsoft AI Division. I clicked it open, my heart pounding like a war drum. Claire, we are deeply impressed by the technological potential you've developed. After reviewing your patent filing and the demo, Microsoft would like to formally propose the following. 1. Acquisition of exclusive ownership rights to Voxa, with a proposed total deal value of $50 million USD, paid in full, no equity included. 2. Appointment of you as lead developer of the Voxa team at Microsoft Seattle office, under the Natural Language AI division. Sen. Retention of your title as founder and inventor in all internal documents and public communications. Please do not share the contents of this email with any third party until the NDA is finalized. If you accept, we would like to schedule a virtual meeting within the next 72 hours. Sincerely, Emily Kang, VP of Product, Microsoft AI Division. I read that email over and over again. My eyes were still red, still watery, but they didn't sting anymore. Not from emotion, but from a kind of relief so powerful it nearly choked me. For the first time, after everything, I knew without doubt, I didn't need them. I didn't need validation from my family. I didn't need a fake handshake, a cold nod, or a belated apology. My worth was no longer something I had to beg for. It had been seen by the right people at the right time. I didn't reply right away. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I stood up, walked over to my desk, and pulled out a folder I had prepared long ago, on nights when I imagined this moment might come and I wouldn't let myself be caught off guard. I had asked an independent attorney, a friend of my academic advisor, to help me draft a press release, just in case everything went the way I hoped. I opened that document. The headline was simple. Stanford student sells AI patent to Microsoft, technology set to reshape global language learning. I tweaked the final lines, adding a firm declaration of full legal ownership under the name Claire Marie Mitchell, with no disputes, no power of attorney. I saved it. Didn't send it yet. But I knew, if the time came, I wouldn't hesitate to press send. The room felt unusually quiet. I sat there, alone, the glow of my screen casting soft light across a face that was tired, but calm. Outside, the Stanford night buzzed as it always did, but for me, the world had just shifted. Not because of the $50 million. Not because of the title at Microsoft, but because, for the first time in my life, I had the power to choose. I could stay silent, or I could speak. I could give, or I could withhold. I could forgive, or let them face the truth themselves. And this time I would choose for myself. I woke up the next morning feeling like I had just been reborn. No trace of anger, no tears left, not even bitterness. Just a quiet stillness. As if my body had finally shed the dust of childhood, leaving behind every moment of being ignored, dismissed, or undervalued. I made a cup of coffee, opened my laptop. The legal response folder still sat on the desktop. I double-clicked it, opened the carefully drafted press release. And this time, without hesitation, I sent it to 5 major media outlets, the same ones that had once invited me to contribute to their student tech columns, which I had declined, thinking I wasn't noteworthy enough. Now, I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't diminishing myself anymore. 11 o'clock in the morning. I was halfway through typing a thank you email to Emily Kang when my phone rang. A classmate was calling, nearly shouting into the phone. Claire! Oh my God, you're on TechCrunch. Front page. I opened my browser and typed in the site. The headline hit me like a slap from the past. Microsoft acquires breakthrough AI technology from Stanford student, Claire Mitchell, forced by her family to give up ownership. Right below it was a photo of me presenting at the student conference, holding a clicker, eyes fixed straight ahead. No filter, no studio lights, but more real than anything I had ever seen. I read every line, heart pounding. The article laid out clearly how I developed Voxa from the moment I started writing the algorithm in my tiny apartment to the day I received that email from Microsoft. But what made the article go viral wasn't the technology, it was the truth hidden behind it. The journalist had included audio clips from my conversation with my family at graduation, a recording I had quietly started on my phone, instinctively, because something in me had already suspected things would go wrong. I listened to the excerpt again. In the article, my father's voice, cold and sharp. Sophie has a future. All you do is write things no one understands. This transfer is for the family. Then my mother's voice. What does a degree even mean? Your sister needs a career, not your pride. And finally, my own voice, soft but clear. What you tore wasn't my diploma. It was the last bit of respect I had left for you. I thought it would hurt, But it didn't. I felt light. Because for the first time, the truth wasn't distorted. For the first time, the world heard me not through my parents' lens, not through Sophie's version, not through the gaze of people who only saw a weird, bookish girl. They heard me, and they understood. By afternoon, social media exploded. Under TechCrunch's post, tens of thousands of comments appeared within hours. What kind of parents are these? Classic case of using one daughter to fund the golden child. I mina. Thank you, Claire, for standing up. The kids who were overlooked by their families will shine in the end. She's not just an inventor, she's a torchbearer for all of us who were told we were too different to be loved. A TikTok clip quoting the article went viral at lightning speed. Claire Mitchell, the overlooked daughter, now a millionaire inventor. Local news stations started reaching out for interviews. A popular blogger published a lengthy analysis, calling me a new icon for the next generation of women in tech. And then, the one thing I never expected happened. The New York Times, the same publication I had sent a personal essay to at 18 and never heard back from, reached out to me directly. They wanted to run an in-depth feature. But it wasn't just about technology. They wanted to talk about family. About kids like me, raised in homes that looked normal on the outside but were filled with comparison, control, and unspoken prejudice on the inside. The reporter asked me, "Claire, why did you release the recording?" I looked at her, thought for a few seconds, then replied, "Because if I didn't, the story would have been told their way again. I'd be the ungrateful daughter. I'd be the one who disrespected her parents. I'm tired of staying silent just to protect the image of people who never protected mine." The interview was published under the headline, "Silence is no longer an option, Claire Mitchell and the Rise of the Overlooked Child." By that point, there was no turning back. And I didn't want to turn back. My family had started to feel the heat. An old friend sent me a screenshot. My mother had been temporarily suspended from the school where she taught. The administration had requested an explanation regarding behavior that may have negatively impacted students' emotional well-being. My father disappeared from LinkedIn. His profile vanished after hundreds of angry comments from young engineers. Sophie locked all her social media accounts, the same ones where she had once posted as a life coach and future entrepreneur. No one could find her anymore. I didn't feel triumphant, I just felt balanced. There was no need for revenge. No need to trample anyone. The truth being seen was enough. That night, I walked alone around the quiet streets of Palo Alto. Along the way, I overheard two students talking. "Did you read that Claire Mitchell story? Crazy stuff. But honestly, kind of inspiring." I smiled. They didn't recognize me walking just behind them. But that was okay, because I didn't need to be recognized. I just needed to know that. Finally, someone heard my voice. I used to think that if the truth ever came out, my parents would deny everything. That they'd say it was a misunderstanding, that I made it up out of childhood pain, that they would never do such things. But what surprised me wasn't denial, it was silence, a deep, heavy, avoiding kind of silence. And I realized, this time, they couldn't rewrite the story. They weren't in control anymore. The wheel of public truth had turned and nothing could stop it now. The first person to take the hardest hit wasn't me, it was Sophie. Within just 3 days of the first article going viral, her social media, once filled with glossy photos captioned, "Number CEO vibes," "Number founder life," "Number future unicorn," was picked apart by the online community. People began resharing old posts where Sophie had tagged herself as the co-founder of a groundbreaking language learning AI technology, a technology I built, alone, without a team, without a co-founder. Dozens of comments poured in. Co-founder? Why not just say she stole her sister's work and claimed it as her own? This girl is a living example of what it means to take credit for someone else's success. I said nothing. No comments, no reposts, no further interviews with the press. But others spoke up for me. Tech journalists, the same ones who covered the Microsoft acquisition, began to dig deeper. They uncovered the patent, filed under my name alone. The presentation slides I submitted to the AI conference. The email history with Microsoft, time-stamped and verified. Meanwhile, Sophie had no documents. Nothing to prove she had ever contributed to the development of Voxa. The investors she had been negotiating with began to quietly withdraw. One investment firm issued a public statement. "We do not partner with individuals who misrepresent their credentials to build a personal brand. Trust is the foundation of any startup." I received an email from someone who had once been a marketing director at the media firm where Sophie interned. It had only one sentence. "Thank you for letting the truth speak. We had our doubts, but no proof." As for my parents, the consequences arrived slower but ran deeper. My father had been a senior engineer at a major electronic circuit design firm in San Jose. He was known for being strict, meticulous, someone with high professional ethics. But after the audio recording was leaked, especially the part where he said, "The patent belongs to the family, not just the girl," his credibility collapsed completely. A large engineering forum posted a scathing critique. "A technical leader who doesn't understand the concept of intellectual property, what exactly are we trusting him with?" Emergency internal meetings began at his company. I don't know the full details, but a week later, his profile vanished from the company website. I was told he was suspended indefinitely and that the legal department had launched an internal investigation to determine whether he had attempted to use personal influence to interfere with my intellectual property rights. While the truth was that he hadn't, the stain on his reputation stuck, and it couldn't be wiped clean. As for my mother, the reckoning came from the very school where she taught a public high school. That had been her stage. She organized life skills workshops, gave talks on ethics and family responsibility. But after the audio was made public, students started talking. One sent the recording directly to the principal. Some parents emailed the school board. How can someone who says your child doesn't need self-respect just serve the family be responsible for teaching teenagers about values? As a result, my mother was placed on temporary suspension and required to attend a hearing with the Professional Ethics Committee. A local newspaper ran a short headline: "Prominent teacher suspended after scandal involving daughter." I received an email on Tuesday morning. It was from Sophie's address. "Please, Claire, this is getting out of hand. Can you take the article down? Or at least ask the media to stop. I know I was wrong, but this should be handled privately. No one needs to see our family turned into a spectacle." I read it, sat in silence for a few minutes, then hit reply. "I never made anything public." "You did, all of you." Just one sentence. Not long. Not harsh, but enough. Because it was the truth. It was them in their overconfidence that I would stay silent like every time before who pushed this into the spotlight. It was them who assumed I would sign, swallow my pride, and smile for the family. But not this time. And the silence that followed, full of confusion, disappointment, and maybe even despair, was the only answer they deserved. 8 months after graduation, the day I walked out of a room filled with betrayal and into a world I built for myself. I stood on stage at the Women in Tech conference in San Jose, California. No graduation robe. No medals. No one leading me to the podium. I walked out wearing the shoes I wore when I filed my first patent application, a blazer I bought with the first advance payment from Microsoft, and a calm gaze that said I had walked through every storm to get here, not for recognition, but to share what I've learned, scars and all. The auditorium was silent. Hundreds of women, engineers, students, founders looked at me, not because I was famous, but because they saw themselves in me. I spoke about Voxa, about the technical journey, about how a tiny idea in a dim apartment could change the way machines understand humans. And then, I paused. Looked directly at the front row, where first-year students were listening with wide eyes, and I said, "People ask me why I didn't stay silent. Why I didn't keep it a private family matter. But the truth is I did stay silent, almost my entire life. And what I learned is this. Silence doesn't protect anyone except the person causing the harm. Family isn't where you're born. Family is where you're respected. If that place doesn't give you respect, it's not a home, it's just a place you used to live." The auditorium erupted. Not with thunderous applause, but with that quiet, breath-held awe that only rises when someone names what you've never dared to say out loud. A student, eyes glassy with tears, stood up and said, "I left engineering because my mom said it was a man's job. But because of you, I'm going back." I bowed my head, not in thanks but to honor what had just passed between us. After the speech, I officially announced the launch of the Voiceless No More Scholarship, a fund dedicated to supporting women in STEM who had been discouraged or blocked by their families. The fund would cover tuition, housing, tech equipment, and, most importantly, mentorship from those who had once walked out of the shadows, like I had. I didn't create the fund to get revenge on the past. I created it to change someone else's future so they wouldn't have to sit in a cold apartment, like I once did, wondering if they were wrong for chasing what they loved. 1 month later, I officially moved to Seattle to begin my full-time role at Microsoft as the lead developer of Voxa, exactly as promised. My office was on the 6th floor of a glass building, overlooking Lake Union, where the water shimmered silver every afternoon. I kept a simple, old wooden desk, nothing too big. On it sat a single monitor, a small framed print that read, "You belong here," and one item I had carried with me since graduation. The reissued diploma from Stanford, complete with seal and signatures, and at the very bottom, printed in bold, "Claire Mitchell, Inventor." The first time I held it again, I didn't cry, I didn't shake. I just looked at it for a long time, as if I were staring into an older version of myself, the girl who was once told she was only good at writing things no one understands, who had her diploma torn in half on graduation day, who stood between family and justice, and chose the latter. Now, she was sitting here not in triumph, but in peace. I no longer speak to my parents or to Sophie. They haven't reached out either. Where their lives have gone, I don't know, and it no longer matters. I'm no longer waiting for an apology. Because I've received something 100 times more powerful. Freedom from warped expectations, from the need to earn love through obedience, from the shadow of a family that never saw me clearly. I often stay late at the office. Not because I have to, but because I love the silence where the lines of code I write aren't judged by gender, background, or age. They're judged only by what they do. And for the first time in my life, I don't have to prove who I am to be heard. On a weekend night, I opened my laptop to review Voxa's system before launching a new update. As the program ran, I watched the city lights reflect on the water through the window. A coworker stepped in, saw me alone, and asked, "Why aren't you heading home?" "It's Friday night." I smiled and said, "I am home. This is home." Not everyone is lucky enough to be born into a family that uplifts, believes in, and loves unconditionally. Some of us, like me, grow up in houses where every step toward our dreams is seen as a threat. Where what should be a foundation becomes a wall. But I want you to know this, you are not wrong for being different. And you are definitely not wrong for holding on to what makes you unique. Family is not a place that forces you to bow your head for the sake of tradition. It is not where your worth is defined by distorted standards. Family is where you are seen, heard, and respected. And if you've never had that, build it. From scratch. From small steps. From a quiet dream. From a heart that refuses to be silenced. I'm not telling this story to be a hero. I'm telling it to say, if you're sitting alone at night, writing code, sketching blueprints, practicing chords, or crafting words no one understands, you're not alone. I've been there. And you'll get through it. Believe in your voice, even if it trembles. Because one day, that very voice will unlock a door the whole world once tried to keep shut.